Namaste children, a very warm welcome to each one of you for today's science session. My name is Vidyashree and I am one of your science teachers for the current academic year. Children, in our online classes, we have begun with the bridge course topics, right? We have begun discussing the topics of our bridge course. Today also in this video, we will continue with one of the bridge course topics, okay? And today's topic of discussion is adaptations in plants. We have already revised adaptations in animals during the online classes, right? Here in today's session, we will recall all the concepts which we have learned, under the chapter adaptations in plants. Okay, so without any delay, let's get started, children. Children, by now I'm sure that each one of you are familiar as to what an adaptation is. Am I right? So, what do you mean by adaptation? Children, wait, before getting into adaptation, I want you all to recall habitat. Remember the word habitat? Remember the term? What is an habitat? Yes. The habitat is the natural home of a living organism. Here in this case, the natural home or the natural surrounding of a plant is termed as a habitat. A habitat is a place where the plant grows, where it gets its food and nutrition, and where it, reproduces. Such a place is called the natural home or habitat of a living organism. All right. Now, can you define adaptation? Yes, an adaptation is nothing but a change or a special characteristic feature developed by a living organism so that it can survive in its natural habitat. What is an adaptation? An adaptation is a slow change developed by a living organism or a plant in this case so that it can survive in its natural habitat. Alright? Though we find a wide variety of plants in our surroundings, you should notice that all of these plants have the same parts. That is, all plants have leaves, all plants have stem, roots, isn't it, children? Despite this fact, despite this common factor, plants live in different places. That is, they live in different habitat. Some plants live in water, whereas some other plants live and grows on land. Right. Now, accordingly, the plants are divided into two groups. The plants are divided into two groups on the basis of their habitat. That is, aquatic plants and terrestrial plants. Aquatic plants, as you can recall, are the plants which live in water. On the other hand, terrestrial plants are the ones which live and grows on land. Alright, now let us discuss the adaptations of these groups of plants one by one. Now we know that plants are divided into two groups or two categories based on their habitat, aquatic and terrestrial, isn't it? In the same manner, aquatic plants are further classified into three types. Aquatic plants are further divided into three parts, and they are floating plants, fixed plants and underwater plants. Alright, now let us discuss the adaptations among these different types of aquatic plants. First up, the floating plants. So children, what do you mean by floating plants? Were you able to recall? Yes, simply speaking, the plants which are able to float on the surface of water bodies are called floating plants. Alright, floating plants are the plants which can easily float on the surface of water bodies like lakes or ponds. Alright, children, now tell me what makes these plants, what helps these plants to float easily on the surface of water bodies? Forget about the plants. Take any object for that matter. If an object has to float or it has to sink, what is the factor that decides whether an object has to float or sink? Isn't it their body weight? Yes. Here also, it is the body weight of the plant that decides its floating capability. Therefore, the focus of adaptation in this group of plants is mainly on the body weight. That is, floating plants have lighter body weight, have adapted to lighter body weight, which naturally helps them to float on the surface of water bodies. Here among these plants, you can see that the leaves and stems are swollen. That is, they are spongy in nature and they are filled with air. That is the reason why they have lighter body weight, children. Okay, so now can you recall some of the examples? Give me some examples of floating plants. Yes, they are water hyacinth, duckweed or water lettuce. Moving on to the next category of aquatic plants, it is the fixed plants. Children, in contrast to floating plants, fixed plants are fixed to the mud at the bottom of the pond. That is, with the help of their roots, these plants are fixed to the mud. Alright. Now, in spite of this, they appear to be floating on the surface of water bodies. Let me give you an example. The example of such plants are, water lily, lotus, all these are examples. Now, you would have noticed that these plants appear to be floating on the surface of water bodies, though they are fixed to the mud at the bottom of the pond. How is it possible? It is because of their long stem. Alright, these plants, these fixed plants have long, hollow and waxy coated stems which helps the flowers and leaves in these plants to float easily on the surface of water bodies. Alright, now you can notice among these plants that the size of the leaves are extremely large. That is, it is very wide, broad in nature. Right? Why? So that it can get sufficient sunlight and air which would help them in manufacturing, in the preparation of their food. Also, one more adaptation among these plants is that the stomata, that stomata is present on the lower side of the leaves, but among these fixed plants, stomata is mostly concentrated on the upper surface. Why? Because the lower surface is touching the water. Hence, the stomata is present on the upper surface. Okay. One more important feature is that the leaves are coated with wax. They have a waxy coating so that it repels water and helps in floating of these plants. Alright, children? Yes, these were some of the adaptations among fixed plants. Next up is the underwater plants or submerged plants. Children, true to its name, underwater plants remain completely submerged in water. In comparison to floating plants or fixed plants, the submerged plants are completely submerged, or it is buried within the water body, and hence the name. Okay. So now what are the adaptations among these plants? Let us discuss one by one. These plants have thin stem and ribbon-like leaves. Right? They have thin stem and very thin leaves, ribbon-like leaves, divided leaves, and that is the reason why they remain unaffected by water currents. Alright. The next adaptation is they do not have any stomata on their surface, on the surface of their leaves, and that is why they breathe through their body surface. They utilize, these plants make use of the carbon dioxide that is present in water and give out oxygen, which is in turn used by other water animals. Okay, so yes, these were some of the adaptations with respect to submerged plants. What are the examples? Come on, list them down. Yes, Vallisneria and Hydrilla are some of the examples of underwater plants, children. Now don't get confused here. Underwater, submerged, both are same. Underwater plants and submerged plants, both are same. Next, let us move on to discuss the adaptations among terrestrial plants. Terrestrial plants are of different types depending on the place where they grow. Here we are going to discuss some important adaptations of plants growing in plain, plants in desert areas, plants of the cold region and plants in marshy areas. Alright, now let us take this up one by one. First, let us discuss the plants growing in plain region. Alright. Children, the plants or trees that grow in plains have numerous branches. They have many branches and they have plenty of leaves. Alright. And here you will also notice that the trees that grow in these regions, they shed their leaves periodically, especially during winters. These plants or trees, they shed their leaves and hence they are given a specific term. The trees are given a specific name called deciduous trees. Alright, so what are deciduous trees? Deciduous trees are the trees which shed their leaves during winter. Among these plants, the leaves are renewed periodically. Alright children, we can say that it is one of the adaptations among the plants growing in plain region. Now, can you give some examples for, plants growing in plains, children? Yes, the common examples are your neem tree, gulmohar tree, peepal tree and even banyan trees. All these are examples of plants growing in plain region. Alright, let us move on to discuss the next group of plant. The desert plants. Children, you all are very well aware about the conditions in a desert. How is the condition in a desert? It is extremely dry and hot, isn't it? Now, in spite of such an extreme condition, some plants do manage to grow and survive, under these conditions in desert. How do they manage to do so? By, doing some modifications. Now, what are the modifications or what are the adaptations here with respect to desert plants? One is, it is the retaining of water, adaptation with respect to retaining the water, and the second adaptation is with respect to absorption of water. Alright, coming to the first one, retention of water. How do desert plants retain their water? I think all of you are aware, all of you are familiar with the word transpiration. Transpiration is nothing but loss of water from the surface of leaf through stomata, right? Here in desert plants, what happens is the leaves are modified to spines. In most of the desert plants, leaves are modified to spines, or some of them have very tiny leaves, okay? From this, they can minimize the loss of water or they can avoid the loss of water through transpiration. Now, if there is absence of leaves in these plants, what is the part of the plant that prepares food for them? It is the stem, children. Stem is responsible for storing excess water, and that is why the stem in these plants is extremely fleshy. Alright. Also, the stems have chlorophyll in them and carry out the process of photosynthesis. Alright. Now moving on to the next aspect, that is absorption of water. Absorption of water is concerned to the roots. So here in desert plants, the roots are modified in such a way that they are extremely strong and embedded deep and wide so that it can absorb even the little amount of water which is found in and around it. Alright, so these are the modifications with respect to desert plants. Can you give me some examples of desert plants? Yes, cactus. Any other example? Prickly pine and date palms are also examples of a desert plants, children. Moving on, let us discuss some adaptations of plants growing in cold regions. Now here, by cold regions, I mean the trees or plants that grow in mountains or hilly regions. Alright, they do have a certain set of adaptations so as to adapt themselves to the cold environment or cold conditions. Here we are going to discuss three common or three important adaptations. Here the first adaptation is with respect to the shape of the tree. The trees growing in these regions are very tall and they have a conical shape. Why? Because these regions receive snowfall almost throughout the year, and when it is easier for the snow to slide down if the trees are shaped conically. That is the reason why such an adaptation, children. Alright. The next adaptation is with respect to leaves. The leaves in these trees are shaped like a needle. They have a needle-shaped leaf coated with wax. Again, this is also to protect the leaves or protect the trees from extreme cold conditions and the snowfall. Alright, moving on to the third adaptation. It is with respect to the flowers. Yes, children, flowers in these trees are modified to cones. Alright. Now, let us move on to discuss certain adaptations of plants growing in marshy areas. Children, the soil in marshy area is extremely sticky and clayey in nature, which means that the roots that grow in these plants, the plants that grow in these regions do not get sufficient air or no air at all. Therefore, any adaptation in these plants is with respect to obtaining fresh air. Alright, the common adaptation that you see in these plants is that the roots grow above the soil. They grow above the sticky soil so that they are exposed to fresh air. That is, they get fresh air. Alright, and such roots which grow above the clay, they are given a term and they are called as breathing roots. Okay, children, let us move forward and discuss about insectivorous plants and parasitic plants. We see many different varieties of plant in our surroundings. All of these plants or most of these plants have green color leaves and they prepare their own food. Isn't it, children? But this is not the case with all the plants. That is, not all plants prepare their food, but instead they have different means of obtaining their food. Under this, we are going to discuss two different types of plants, that is insectivorous plants and parasitic or non-green plants. Insectivorous plants are also called as carnivorous plants. That is because they live on insects. Yes, children, these plants eat insects. Alright, I hope you all can recall the examples. What are the examples? Sundew plant, yes, pitcher plant, and Venus flytrap are the examples of insectivorous plants. Now, what are non-green plants? Some plants do not have chlorophyll in them and hence they are not able to perform photosynthesis. That is, they cannot synthesize their own food, prepare their own food. In such a case, these plants depend on another plant, be it living or dead, for their food. Such plants are called as parasitic plants or non-green plants. Alright, now what are the examples for this? Your mounds that grow on the bread, fungus, a marble, all these are examples of parasitic plants. So with this we come to the end of today's revision video. I will see you all in the next class, children. I hope you all enjoyed today's session and you were able to recall the concepts of adaptations in plants. Alright then, see you all in the next session. Dhanyavad.